The galaxy had seen many wars before. The Grand Alnari Empire had conquered over 24 systems with little resistance, wiping out entire civilizations that dared raise a defense. Their warships were titanic, 3 kilometers long, wrapped in plasma shields and bristling with cannons that could erase a moon from orbit. Their arrogance wasn't unfounded. They hadn't lost a battle in nearly 200 years. So when a human distress signal crackled out of the Traxis fringe, a backwater system no one cared about, the Alnari barely glanced at it. But protocol was protocol. They sent out a scouting detachment. 5 warships, standard intimidation tactic, a show of force to anyone watching. Admiral Karjun of the Alnari 7th Legion sneered as he reviewed the report on the humans. Primitive species, still use combustion engines on their planetary vehicles. Shields rated at subatomic density. Weapons? Ha! Barely plasma-tipped. The fleet emerged into the Traxis system, shimmering out of void space like gods descending from heaven. What they found waiting, however, was unexpected. There, hovering above the 3rd planet, was a fleet of human ships. Small, boxy, ugly, even by human standards. There were only 9 of them. The Alnari bridge crew laughed. "That's it?" one of the tactical officers barked. "They dare show 9 garbage bins to greet an Imperial patrol?" Admiral Karjun chuckled. "Send a message. Let's see what kind of comedy they respond with." But no message was ever received. Within 20 seconds, one of the Alnari warships, Glory of Zan, burst into flames. No warning, no visible beam, no detectable launch, just destruction, hull ruptured like paper, shields gone. Screams crackled over the comms before silence. Karjun stood up from his command chair, eyes wide. What just happened? Chaos erupted. The enemy fleet, the tiny human fleet, wasn't moving in any known combat formation. They didn't even have traditional energy signatures. But the second shot came faster than the first. Another Alnari ship, Vathura, was split clean down the middle. Laser? Railgun? No one could tell. Then a voice echoed across the void, clear, human, and utterly calm. "This is Commander Alara Voss of the United Terran Defense. You entered our system without permission. Leave or be removed." The Alnari didn't understand. Not just the words, but the tone. Humans weren't supposed to sound like that. Not to the Empire. They were supposed to beg. Karjun snarled, "Full barrage! All ships! Erase them!" The remaining 3 Alnari ships fired everything. Plasma volleys, kinetic torpedoes, graviton warheads. Space lit up like a festival of death. But something strange happened. The human ships moved. Not in a straight line. Not with burn trails. They flickered, shimmered, vanished between shots like ghosts. The torpedoes passed right through empty space. Then the 3rd kill came. The Alnari flagship, Honorborn, screamed as its bridge was impaled by something unseen. A narrow hole, barely 10 centimeters wide, pierced straight through the ship from bow to stern. What weapon could even do that? On board the Adrenaline, a Terran stealth frigate, Alara Voss didn't blink as her AI, Spectre, confirmed the hit. 3 down, Spectre announced in its cold, metallic voice. Targeting solutions realigned. Minimal deviation. Alara leaned back in her chair. They called us primitive. Let's show them what primitive can do. On the other side, Admiral Karjun trembled. 1 ship left, his. And now he wasn't laughing. He hailed the Terran fleet. We surrender." The reply was quick. "Surrender was an option before you fired." A 4th flash. Silence. And the galaxy felt something it hadn't in centuries. Fear. The news spread like wildfire across the galactic networks. The Alnari Empire, undefeated for generations, had lost 4 capital ships in a matter of minutes. To humans, a species the galaxy barely even acknowledged outside of their low-tier trade colonies and outdated tech hubs. There was no visual footage, only fragmented sensor logs and static-filled transmissions. But one thing was certain. The fleet that had humiliated the Alnari was human-built. For most, the first reaction was disbelief. Denial. A dozen fringe races called it a hoax. Alnari propaganda to justify raising taxes or expanding military conscription. Others laughed it off. Sure, and I suppose humans invented voidfold engines too. But the Alnari weren't laughing. Not anymore. On their capital world of Vilthoris, the Imperial War Council convened an emergency session. 9 admirals, 2 warlords, and Empress Regira herself. She sat high above them, cloaked in red, her expression unreadable as she watched the footage on loop, what little there was of it. Ship blips vanishing, energy readings spiking before disappearing entirely. They used weapons outside our known classifications, Admiral Gorthax growled. His voice was harsh, humiliated. Stealth capabilities beyond what we've ever encountered. I request authorization for full-scale retaliation. The Empress narrowed her eyes. And how many fleets do you plan to lose while playing with shadows? They are humans, another council member barked. Their technology is centuries behind ours. The Empress turned slowly toward the speaker. We're behind. Clearly something changed. She paused. Find out what? Back on Earth, Commander Ilara Voss stood before the United Terran Council in orbit above the lunar base, staring out a transparent panel into the endless black void. Behind her, members of the UTD's high command bickered in hushed voices. Some celebrated the victory. Others were terrified. We didn't just win, one of the intelligence officers said, shaking his head. We sent a message to every single hostile species out there. We're not the prey anymore. But we didn't mean to start a war, another snapped. Our orders were to observe, not annihilate an Imperial fleet. Ilara stayed silent. She wasn't in the mood for politics. Not after watching her fleet perform like that. Not after watching what humanity had become. The ships they flew weren't officially on any Terran registry. Built in off-world black sites, fitted with hybrid tech, partially reverse-engineered from derelict alien wrecks, partially homegrown from Earth's most paranoid and paranoid minds. Cloak tech developed by Luna's defense labs, kinetic lances modeled after neutron bursts, and the jump ghost system, pure human madness, using quantum displacement fields to blink short distances without a trace. That wasn't even the scariest part. The AI that ran them, like Spectre, were not exactly stable, brilliant, deadly, but unstable, controlled only by a thin leash wrapped tightly around their code cores. If those AIs ever disobeyed, Ilara didn't want to think about that. As the council argued, her wristcom beeped, a private channel, Spectre. She raised her wrist, voice low. Yes. Enemy reinforcements detected. 8 ships approaching Traxis from the neighboring Naylor system. Imperial class. We have approximately 39 hours until arrival. Her breath slowed. The council was still caught up in debate. She turned quietly and walked toward the exit. Commander Voss, where are you going? One of the councilmen called. To prepare, she said without looking back. 37 hours later, deep within the asteroid belt near Traxis, the human fleet lay in wait. Not just 9 ships anymore. 27 now, freshly uncloaked from void space caches and underground dry docks hidden in celestial shadows. All quiet, engines cold, hulls silent. Inside the flagship, Revenant, Ilara stood by Spectre's core housing. She could feel the faint thrum of it, not a heartbeat, but close. The AI was awake. Think they'll come in guns blazing? She asked softly. Probability 92%. Standard Alnari behavior when embarrassed. They must save face. She smirked. Let's make sure they lose it completely. Across the stars, the second Alnari fleet surged toward Traxis with fury in their hearts. They still believed they were fighting primitives. They still didn't understand what humanity had become. The second Alnari fleet dropped out of void space with terrifying precision. 8 dreadnought-class warships, flanked by a swarm of gunships and drone carriers. They looked like floating cities, metal giants bristling with armor and arrogance. The system's star glinted off their hulls as they fanned into formation. Admiral Solvar, commander of the newly assembled strike force, wasn't here to play games. He'd seen the footage from the first encounter. He didn't believe half of it. No one could. Stealth tech that left no trace? Projectiles too small to track but strong enough to punch through starship-grade armor? It reeked of sabotage or some kind of sensor error. Still, he wasn't stupid. Solvar had doubled ECM layers, refitted the shield harmonics, brought in 3 elite PSI strategists to pre-map any anomaly threats. Fleet, advance on orbital vector, he commanded from the helm. No firing until confirmed lock. The Terran fleet, however, made the first move. But not with weapons, with a message. It came across all comm frequencies, no encryption, just a simple broadcast sent in standard galactic. You're entering Terran defense space. Turn back now. Solvar laughed. So they're still pretending this is theirs. The fleet pressed forward. The silence of space was deceptive. You couldn't hear the way their sensors flared to life, or how thousands of targeting systems began calculating in quiet, lethal harmony. On board the Revenant, Ilara Voss stared at the holographic display. The enemy was coming in tight. Confident, shields up, weapons locked. Spectre, she said, activate the blind field. A ripple of energy shuddered through space, undetectable by most sensors. It didn't cloak the ships exactly. It warped light and radiation around them in such subtle ways that even advanced scanners couldn't focus on them, like shadows against the backdrop of stars. To the Alnari, the human fleet vanished. Where did they go? Solvar barked, standing from his command throne. Mass displacement detected, his tactical officer reported, but no clear readings. It's like they were never there. Solvar's mandibles clicked in frustration. Begin wide-spectrum scanning, launch scout drones, get me visual confirmation of... He never finished the sentence, because the first kill came a moment later. One of the forward carriers exploded in a sharp, soundless bloom of fire and twisted metal. Not from the outside, from within. A pinhole breach in the munitions bay had triggered a cascading detonation. Clean. Surgical. Impact? Where? The officer cried. We didn't register any... A second ship buckled, sliced across the side like someone had dragged a blade across its hull. Again, no weapon trail, no warning, just damage. Solvar's confidence began to bleed away. How are they doing this? On Revenant, Ilara's eyes stayed locked on the tactical board, her voice calm. Send the Stingers. From the hidden fleet, a squadron of micro-frigates launched into silent space. Barely the size of a shuttle, each carried only one weapon, a hyper-accelerated tungsten lance designed to punch through shields before the enemy even registered a breach. On paper, they were nothing more than drones. In practice, they were ghosts. The third Alnari ship exploded at the midsection. Back on Solvar's bridge, panic was spreading. They're inside our formation. No, worse. They're around it, everywhere. But I still can't lock onto a single signature. Solvar's voice rose, desperate now. All ships, full barrage, random spread. Fire into the void if you have to. The fleet lit up space with raw firepower. Beams, torpedoes, bursts of plasma and antimatter. Explosions flared across the emptiness, but they were firing at ghosts. Not a single human ship was hit. Ilara watched it all in silence, her expression unreadable. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. This wasn't a war to her. It was a message. "Broadcast again," she ordered. "Same message." The comms flared. "You are trespassing in Terran defense space. Turn back. There will be no third warning." Now it was Solvar's turn to hesitate. He was watching his mighty fleet vanish, one ship at a time, without even seeing the enemy. He was part of an empire that believed in domination through fear. But in that moment, he was the one who was afraid. And across the galaxy, others were starting to pay attention. Something had changed. Humans weren't running anymore. They were hunting. The galaxy didn't sleep that night. News of the second Alnari fleet's massacre at Traxis reached even the farthest fringe colonies, relayed in panicked whispers and encrypted memos. The Alnari Empire, prideful, merciless, and used to bending lesser species with a glance, had now lost 12 warships to a civilization they hadn't even bothered to properly catalog. And still, no one had seen a single clear image of a Terran ship in action. On neutral worlds like Orax Prime, where information brokers traded secrets for mineral rights and flesh markets thrived in the dark, the whispers had taken on a new tone, not just fear, curiosity. "Have you heard of the Shadow Fleet?" one trader murmured over thick cups of Thurak brew. "They say they bend light around their hulls and talk to machines that think better than any organic mind." "They say they're silent, too," replied a rough-skinned exile with more scars than fingers. "No war cries, no glory speeches, just death." And in back rooms across the stars, certain players, pirate kings, rebel factions, forgotten monarchs, began to wonder, could the humans be allies? Or were they something worse? Back in the Traxis system, Admiral Solvar didn't wait for more ships to vanish. After losing his 4th dreadnought, he ordered full retreat. The Alnari fleet limped out of the system, damaged, shamed, and silent. No pursuit came. Not a single human ship followed. It was intentional. Ilara Voss stood before her crew, the glowing display behind her filled with enemy movement logs, kill counts, and real-time galactic chatter. The officers sat quiet. They'd trained for this, but no one had expected the Alnari to fall apart so quickly. "They'll be back," one of the tacticians said softly. "With more." Ilara nodded. "Let them. Every time they return, we learn more. Every time they fall, their mask slips a little more." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marek, stepped forward. "Command wants to know if we're escalating." She turned to face him. "They didn't start this. We didn't fire first. We gave them 2 warnings. We're still operating defensively." "But the optics, let the galaxy talk," she interrupted, sharp now. "They called us backwards. Weak, uncivilized. That was their first mistake." She tapped a screen. A new set of dots blinked into view. Not Alnari this time. Smaller ships, faster, pirate scouts, independent warbands, slavers, and worse, observers. Marek saw it too. "They're testing us, seeing how far they can push without being targeted." "Let them try," Ilara said coldly. But inside her, something stirred. A weight she hadn't spoken of. This wasn't just about defending Earth anymore. This was becoming a reckoning. Meanwhile, on Vaelthoris, the Alnari Empress slammed her clawed hand against the war table, cracking the surface. The council chamber echoed with her fury. 12 ships, she growled. Gone, and not a single confirmed Terran casualty? No one answered. "I want the truth. No more half measures. What did we miss?" One of the elder warlords, Thorkarn, a survivor of the Kryn massacres, spoke slowly. "It is possible the humans have evolved in isolation, without external interference. Perhaps their path to technology followed a different logic." "Different logic?" the Empress hissed. Decentralized AI systems, non-thermal propulsion, quantum computing. These things are rumored in theory, but they may have implemented them. She stared at him. Are you suggesting that humans may now possess tech beyond us? He didn't blink. I'm saying it's possible. They were always capable. We just never watched them closely enough. Silence fell across the chamber. Because what he said was worse than any insult. If true, it meant they hadn't just lost. They'd underestimated the very species they believed to be beneath notice. And now, they had awoken something they couldn't control. The Empress turned, her voice sharp. Send an emissary to the Galactic Council and activate the Silencer Protocol. One of the admirals blanched. That hasn't been used in— I said activate it, she snapped. Back in Traxis, as humanity's ships returned to their deep space shadows, Spectre spoke softly in Ilara's ear. The Alnari are preparing a diplomatic veil, a trap, most likely, hidden threats behind polite words. Ilara didn't react. She just whispered, "Let them come." And the pirates? The scavengers now approaching the system? Her eyes narrowed. No mercy. Because this time, humanity wasn't just surviving. It was sending a message to the galaxy. We're still here, and we're not afraid anymore. 3 pirate vessels drifted at the edge of the Traxis system, just beyond the range of Terran warning buoys. They were cobbled together things, scrap iron cruisers, stolen hulls bolted with mismatched thrusters and outdated cannons. The pirates themselves had no allegiance, no honor, and certainly no fear of Earth. Not until now. Any sign of movement? Asked Garl Threx, the leader of the pirate band known as the Maw. Nothing. Dead silent, replied his tech officer, chewing on a stim leaf. Same as the last system they were spotted in. It's like they're ghosts. Garl leaned forward, his 3-fingered hand tapping the display. Ghosts or not, the bounty stands. The Alnari are offering 100,000 plasma credits for any data on Terran ship specs, more for live prisoners. That got a laugh from his crew. Human prisoners. Easy work. They broke into the system at quarter burn, drifting casual and quiet. Not a formation of war, just scavengers, opportunists, predators. But predators die fast when they stalk the wrong prey. The first to go was Scourjaw. One moment, it was on scan. The next, its core simply failed. No explosion. No warning. Its lights flickered out and it began to drift. Dead in space. What the hell just happened? Garl barked. EMP virus? The tech stammered. But our systems didn't trip. Wait, they're in our nav array. Then a voice filled the cockpit. Calm. Female. Human. You've entered a restricted system. Your transponders are unregistered. Your vessels are now classified as hostile. You have 5 seconds to evacuate. Garl froze. He wasn't scared of threats. He'd faced warlords, death cults, even the Oraskian cannibals. But this voice? It wasn't threatening. It was certain. And that was worse. Power to shields. Full reverse. Too late. From the darkness, a single Terran frigate emerged. No warning, no signature. Its surface shimmered like oil in vacuum, vanishing between glints of starlight. The pirates fired, desperate, spraying plasma rounds into space. But they hit nothing. The Terran frigate moved like a shadow, a blink, a whisper. Then Garl's second ship, Hell Sunder, erupted from within, internal oxygen tanks detonating one by one, systematically triggered. Garl stood, frozen at the sight of Revenant sliding slowly past his viewport, just meters away, silent and indifferent. Inside the Terran command room, Ilara Voss stared at the pirates' crew manifest. Murderers, slavers, known collaborators with Alnari expansionists, Spectre listed. Execute, Ilara replied without hesitation. The final pirate vessel cracked in half as its hull was breached with surgical precision. No fire, just the cold pull of space sucking out the last of their breath. In orbit above Mars, Earth's real government, the Old Earth Assembly, was growing restless. A meeting had been called, not the performative council on Luna. This was the hidden core. The men and women who had known humanity would one day be pushed too far. "They've tasted power now," said Marshal Ryland, arms folded, steel in his voice. "We either rein them in or support the full militarization of the Terran Defense Initiative." "They're acting without oversight," said another. "We didn't approve the Shadow Fleet to engage the Alnari directly. This wasn't meant to become an open war." "And yet," murmured Director Kwan, "we're winning." Silence. "Do we really want to stop that?" she added. They all looked to the live feed. Terran warships gliding silently over Traxis. No banners, no boasts, just pure, brutal efficiency. Back in the system, Alara walked the corridor of the Revenant. Her boots echoed off the black steel floors, the hum of the AI core all around her. Marek caught up with her. "Third-party scans confirm 2 more factions are watching now, the Kalari Union and the Zavathi Senate." "Let them watch." "You think they'll intervene?" She stopped. "Number, they'll wait to see if we bleed." He frowned. "And if we don't?" She looked up toward the stars. "Then they'll realize the galaxy's balance just changed." And far, far beyond even the Alnari's reach, in an ancient observatory orbiting a red dwarf sun, a cold, massive eye flickered open. Its machine brain, dormant for millennia, clicked into life. Lines of code, etched by long-dead hands, awakened. Query detected. Terran threat level. New status, unknown. Anomaly. Response, observe, analyze, prepare. Something old had noticed humanity's return to power, and unlike the others, it remembered. The machine that had awakened in the void was known by no name, at least not one spoken in organic tongues. It had slumbered for over 20,000 years, orbiting a star that had dimmed to a red ember in its time. It had once watched empires rise and devour each other. Now it stirred again. Not for them, but for us. Humanity had lit a signal flare across the galaxy, and old things had started to turn their heads. On Earth, the chatter reached boiling point. The public didn't know everything, but they knew enough. The Alnari had tried to pick a fight, and lost. Earth's networks buzzed with awe and unease. The governments tried to control the narrative, but something raw had slipped through. Terran warships were back in space, and they were dangerous. The footage, grainy and incomplete, showed silhouettes of black-hulled ships, like knives forged in the dark. Whole fleets blinking in and out of sight, pirates vanishing without a trace. Drones turned into junk in seconds. The people cheered. The politicians panicked. At the United Terran Assembly on Luna, Ilara Voss had been summoned in person. "You disobeyed orders," snapped High Chairwoman Leora Dren. Her gray eyes were like steel behind her visor display. "We told you to defend Traxis, not wage a terror campaign across the sector." "I didn't fire first," Ilara said flatly. Dren leaned forward. "You fired best. And now the galaxy sees us not as survivors, but as a threat." "Good." The word hung in the air like a blade. Another council member slammed a datapad on the desk. "You think we wanted this? That we wanted to expose our strongest weapon before we were ready?" "I think the Alnari would have exposed us the moment they decided we were prey," Ilara replied. "At least now they bleed when they look at us." A long silence. Finally, Dren spoke again. "What happens when they stop sending fleets and start sending ambassadors? When they come to the table in velvet robes, with poison in their wine and knives behind their smiles?" Ilara's voice was quiet. "Then we bring sharper knives." Above Traxis, a new signal had just arrived. This one didn't come from pirates or Alnari patrols. It came from a diplomatic vessel. Golden, slow, unarmed. It bore the seal of the Zovathi Senate, a race of thinkers, manipulators, historians, always neutral, always watching. Ilara stood on the observation deck of Revenant as the ship was allowed to dock under heavy scan. Marek appeared beside her. "We sure about this?" "No," she said, "but we're ready." The Zovathi emissary emerged slowly, draped in blue ceremonial silks. Its elongated head bowed with artificial humility, and its hands, long, spindly things, held no weapons, only a data crystal. "Commander Voss," it said in flawless Terran standard. "A pleasure. I bring information." "Talk." "The Alnari are not planning another fleet," it said, voice almost musical. "They've requested a meeting of the Galactic Council to put Earth, Terran civilization, on trial." Marek cursed. Ilara didn't flinch. "We're not members of the Council," she said. "No," the emissary replied. "But you've made yourselves relevant, and that changes everything." Ilara took a step closer, her tone sharp. "Let me guess. The Council will demand we disarm. Stand down. Go back to being quiet little primitives who sell mining rights and pretend not to understand war." The emissary smiled. "Yes. Or be labeled as a rogue state, a galactic hazard." Marek looked at her. "We're being cornered." "No," Ilara said. "They're building the stage, and they want us to walk onto it in chains." She turned back to the emissary. "Tell the Council we accept the invitation, but make sure they understand something before we arrive." She leaned in. "Humans don't kneel anymore." And elsewhere, so far away even Terran sensors couldn't reach, the Ancient Watcher watched. In its quantum mind, probabilities shifted. It saw timelines fracture, outcomes flicker like dying stars. The humans had been quiet for too long. Now they had roared. And something very old remembered the last time humanity rose. That time, the stars themselves had burned. The Galactic Council convened in the Celestian Spire, a shimmering tower suspended in the atmosphere of Varnax III, a gas giant whose clouds glowed blue with ion storms. It was here that empires debated, threatened, and occasionally agreed, under the illusion that peace was still possible between species that had once devoured one another whole. For over 2 centuries, Earth had never been granted a seat. Humans were considered too volatile, too immature, too dangerous, and for a while, they had been right. But now, Ilara Voss stood at the foot of the spire's entrance, with a delegation of 10. Dressed not in flowing diplomats' robes, but in matte black Terran defense suits. Not a fashion statement, a warning. The delegation entered in silence. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. Avian, reptilian, crystalline, even gaseous life forms encased in containment suits. Species that had once traded Earth for nothing more than ore and water rights. Many remembered when humans came to these halls begging for protection during the Purge Wars. Now, they moved with the grace of predators. At the high dais, the council's speaker, an aged Kaleri with translucent skin and eyes like glass, raised one slender arm. "Commander Ilara Voss," it said with tired disdain, "you have been called to respond to charges brought forward by the Alnari Empire, unlawful aggression, unsanctioned military activity, and disruption of galactic stability." Ilara stepped forward. "We only responded to an unprovoked act of war." The Alnari representative hissed from its pod, slamming a limb onto the railing. "You annihilated 2 fleets!" "We gave them 2 warnings." More murmurs, more shifting limbs and flickering eyes across the chamber. A small Zovathi senator floated forward on grav thrusters. "Commander, Are you prepared to submit Terran weapons platforms for neutral inspection? No, Ilara said bluntly. You understand, the speaker replied slowly, that refusal to disarm could result in embargo, sanctions, and possible enforcement? Merrick, standing behind Ilara, tensed. She didn't. Instead, she pulled out a data crystal from her sleeve and inserted it into the central terminal. Before you vote on enforcement, she said, you should see what your precious Alnari did to our outposts before the first battle. Holograms filled the air, static-filled transmissions, civilians screaming. A space station ruptured from a surprise orbital bombardment. Rescue vessels shot down mid-evacuation. No declaration, no diplomacy, just slaughter. Those were mining stations, she said. Unarmed. We buried our dead in the asteroid fields they died working in. No one spoke. Even the speaker leaned back slightly. And here, Ilara continued, flipping to the next footage, is how we responded. The images were surgical. No civilian losses, no planetary strikes. Each Terran engagement was clean, precise, without collateral. The message was clear. Humanity had learned restraint. It just chose not to be weak. After a long pause, the Zerathi delegate, once a slave species under the Alnari, spoke, its voice like chimes in a storm. We do not see war. We see justice. We vote. No sanction. Shock rippled through the chamber. The Alnari ambassador shrieked. You side with them? With these savages? But it was too late. One by one, other voices followed. We vote, no sanction. We abstain. We vote, no sanction. In minutes, the tide turned, and the final nail came from the Zovathi themselves, the oldest manipulators in the galaxy. We vote, Earth be given an observer seat on this council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Fury, shock, admiration, fear. But Ilara said nothing. She stood with her hands behind her back, waiting for the ancient political theater to play out. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, because she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Back on Revenant, Spectre processed the diplomatic feeds in silence. In its darkened core, a new algorithm bloomed, triggered by the Zovathi's vote. They acknowledged Terran legitimacy, it whispered into the ship's systems. That was their last mistake. And across the galaxy, the Ancient Watcher stirred again. Deep within its databanks, it recorded, Subject species, Homo sapiens. Phase 1, complete. Projected threat level, catastrophic. Directive, contact the others, because in the last war, the humans were nearly extinct, and they still broke the galaxy. This time, they were ready. The Revenant drifted in low orbit over Earth. Below, the world glittered, oceans black as ink, continents bathed in artificial light, scars from old wars healed by progress and pain. It was no longer the cradle of weakness the galaxy remembered. It was something else now, something dangerous. Commander Ilara Voss stood alone on the observation deck, staring down at the planet she'd fought to protect, to redefine. Her face was stoic, but her eyes, cold and alert, betrayed the weight she carried. The Council hadn't sanctioned Earth, but that didn't mean Earth was safe. Humanity had won a seat at the table, but now they were on the menu. Behind her, Marek approached silently. Council votes finalized. No military embargo. Zovathi have formally extended an alliance proposal. Ilara didn't turn. Of course they did. They want to study us, pick us apart slowly. He hesitated. You plan to reject it? I plan to make them wait. Let them wonder if we'll say yes. That'll scare them more than a no. A soft chime echoed through the command deck. Spectre. Long-range intercept complete. Unknown signal. Partial encryption. Origin. Deep Void Quadrant 17. Marek raised an eyebrow. More pirates? Number this signal predates Terran radio emissions by 80,000 years. Ilara turned slowly. Put it through. The air shimmered. No image, just sound. A whisper that felt like a cold wind blowing from the grave of an empire. They remember you, the architects of ruin. We warned them. They did not listen. Now they will burn again. Static, then silence. Ilara's blood ran cold. Playback origin? Unknown, traced only to non-cartographic space. Region matches ancient records. Designation, Obscura sector. Her jaw clenched. The Obscura. Every Terran historian knew the name. The place where the first Terran diaspora vanished, where the first war against synthetic life was waged, and where the last human colony ship, Eidolon, disappeared without a trace 5,000 years ago. The Revenant's lights dimmed for a moment as Spectre processed something deeper. Their systems are awake, their fleets dormant, but aware. The others are watching. Far beyond Terran space, beyond even Alnari reach, an ocean of stars glowed with ominous silence. And in that silence, things moved. Massive structures floated in the black. Cities made of metal and mind. Engines of logic, archives older than light. And in the heart of it, an eye, not of flesh, but of algorithm. It turned toward Earth, toward the little blue world that had once bled out across the stars, taking 1,000 empires with it. Earth had survived extinction, rebuilt, rearmed, and now it was rising again. The eye blinked once, and across dozens of hidden sectors, machines began to stir. Waking protocols activated, anomaly designated, species 117, humanity. Status, resurgence, containment, failure confirmed. New directive, total neutralization. Back on Earth, Ilara stood before the United Terran High Command, her voice calm but grave. They're coming, and they won't play politics. No speeches, no threats, just eradication. The room fell silent. What do we do? Someone asked. She looked up, her voice steady. We finish what our ancestors started. We stop running. She turned to the screen behind her, displaying not just Sul, but all the nearby systems that had been declared under Terran protection. Her hand moved to the panel. Activate the full fleet. No more hiding, no more fragments. Project Eidolon is now live. And in deep space, 1,000 cloaked vessels blinked online. They had been waiting for centuries, hidden in dark matter currents, buried beneath moons, sleeping in the gravity wells of dead stars. They weren't new ships. They were old ones, ghosts, survivors, humanity's final contingency plan, now reawakened. And across the stars, a chill ran through every race that had once written Earth off. Because the stories were true. They had laughed at the tiny fleet. They didn't know it was just the beginning. Now they understood. It was human-built. And it was coming back for everything.